Welcome to One More Hour, the podcast all about backyard ultras, timed races, and the ultra running mindset of going one more. If you're an ultra runner, a trail or ultra runner curious about the format, or just someone who loves to test your limits, you're in the right place. I'm Jackie Wilson, an ultramarathon and marathon run coach, trail runner, outdoor enthusiast, and backyard ultra expert. On this show, I'll bring you stories, strategies, and conversations with runners, race directors, experts, and more to help you go further, dig deeper, and keep going when everything in you says stop. Thank you so much for joining me for some yards. Let's get started with one more. Welcome back to the One More Hour podcast. Today's episode is one that I'm really excited about because we are talking about something that can really make or break your race. It's your feet. It can be one of the top things that takes you out from the race. So I really want to help everyone understand how you can work with your feet so that you can go further on in your race, whether that's a backyard ultra, a timed event, or a marathon or an ultra marathon in general. So my guest today is Dr. Tonya Olson. She is a board certified doctor of physical therapy. She has, I would say, decades of experience of working with runners across various distances. She has been running since, or I should say ultra running since 2005. She's the co-author of the 7th edition of Fixing Your Feet, and she's providing foot care at Michigan Bluff Aid Station of Western States for more than 15 years. So I would say she is highly qualified to talk about the subject of feet, foot care, pain, all of the things related to your feet. And I know not a lot of people like feet, but literally everything starts at your foot, and you need your feet to run. So if you've ever dealt with blisters, hot spots, toenail issues, or you're wondering what do I need to do to prevent my feet from falling apart later in the race, this conversation is definitely for you. So sit back and listen and take in everything that she has to share. Thank you so much, Tonya, for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for inviting me. I love talking about all the things that you just mentioned. And here's the thing, guys. If you're running or doing any type of endurance event, especially if it's multi-hour or multi-day, you don't have the luxury of not liking feet. Like seriously, at some point, they're going to be something that you're going to have to attend to, whether it's your feet or the feet of somebody whom you care about, or at least are tasked, or whose care you are tasked with. So having a basic understanding of foot care and having a preventive approach is your best bet for not having to deal with feet any more than you absolutely have to. So anywho, let's just dive into this topic.
I love that perspective of prevent it, take care of them ahead of time so you do not have to deal with the stuff that a lot of people don't enjoy at all.
Yeah, 100%. There's such a disconnect in the mindset of distance athletes. They completely disregard the one body part that they cannot move without. You've got a hydration and nutrition strategy from A to Z with 74 contingent plans. And I can't tell you how many times, especially at Western states where it's so hard to get in, the runners sit down at mile 55 and they have no plan. There was no plan in place to take care of their feet so that they continue running. And the number 1 and 2 reasons why people drop out of endurance events about the ultra distances is foot care and GI issues. Now, GI issues, despite all your planning, sometimes things just go south, and sometimes you just can't possibly have prevented what happened. It's just one of those many learning opportunities that endurance or ultra distance events allow for us. But foot care largely is completely preventable. Anything that's going to affect your race. And it's not that you have to get a bunch of education about it. It's really pretty simple principles to, at least if you just put your feet on the to-do list, you're way ahead of the curve. So that's my platform, is to educate people, basic foot care principles, basic thinking, and then you can fine tune according to what your own particular issues are. Anyhow, Yeah,
Yeah,
that's my platform.
I love it. I love
Think
it.
about your
So,
feet. Put
yes,
them on the list.
yes. Before we dive into all things foot care, can you just give us a brief overview of who you are and how you got into running?
Well, let's see. So, interestingly enough, my interest in feet stems from growing up riding horses. You've probably heard the adage, no hoof, no horse. And that all actually set me up for choosing to become a physical therapist because with horses and actually now that I'm thinking about it, the ultra running and the endurance sports, because with horses, you have to have a training plan. You're thinking about conditioning. I've been analyzing movement since I was 7 years old because that's a big part of horses is understanding if they're moving differently and figuring out ways to I diagnose if they're having a lameness coming, and you can be using that information from looking at how they're moving and how they're acting, and you use that to fine tune their training plan, which is like the building endurance and athleticism, blah blah blah, and performance depending on your discipline. But horses' hooves, they're a big creature on a relatively small base of support, and different breeds of horses have thinner walls of the foot, and it's the exact horse people are the exact opposite of runners with regard to their appreciation of the feet. Like horse people know you have to take care of the feet, and you're paying to have a farrier come out every 6 weeks, and you're really really doing all the things. So that's where it all started. And then I went to physical therapy. I stayed out of college to ride horses when in my 20s, which was really, really cool. Had some really cool opportunities that were just too great to not take advantage of. And then when I finally decided to go to college, PT just seemed like a really good fit based on things that I was interested in. And then as a PT, I've had rather varied experience. I've worked anywhere from working with elite level runners to hospice care, everything in between. And a part of PT's training for just in PT school, and a part of what we do, especially in the inpatient setting, is wound care. So my understanding, I have training in wound care and experience working in the wound care setting, which is understanding tissue healing, tissue dynamics, and wound care supplies like different type of dressing and that sort of thing. And so when I got into running ultras, it was just kind of a no-brainer for me to start, like, to really kind of dive in to be that resource for foot care for people. And that started, early on, or even in the marathon distances. And then in 2000, I was living in Bend, Oregon. In 2009, a group of runners went down to Western States, the Western States 100, and I asked one of the guys, I was like, well, I kind of want to volunteer and do something. And he's like, go to Michigan Bluff, mile 55, and work with John Von Hoff. And John Von Hoff is the original author of the book Fixing Your Feet. He is the originator of foot care as a thing. He has a researcher's mind, and he was running states back in the day, in the 80s and 90s. And he was the guy who created actual the taping techniques that we're using now. He's the one who kind of thought through things, and he was the manager of an emergency department. And so he knew all the supplies that needed to be ordered. And so he was the first person who was, I mean, there's probably other people, but he's the first person who was suggesting you should be using kinesio tape on your feet instead of the sports tape or whatever. We should be using tincture of benzoin to help the tape adhere longer. And that's all directly from like his experience observing in the emergency department. And then I've taken things to a whole nother level with my training as a physical therapist and my understanding of wound care and shearing and friction, blah, 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 wound tissue healing and all that. And so, yeah, horses is where it all started. Who knew?
I think that is so fascinating. And I just love hearing the story behind the horses when you were, what, 7?
Yeah. Yep. I got my first horse at 7. And interestingly enough, There was a barefoot movement in the horse world that is absolutely parallel to the barefoot movement that happened with humans. So when the barefoot movement came around in what 2010 or whatever with humans with the book Born to Run, I was like, "Oh yeah, I've been through this before." It was the same thinking. Some dude went out and saw horses out west in the wild, and he said, "Why do the wild horses don't need to wear shoes?" And we're doing everything wrong, and the horses who don't live out in the wild, never mind the fact that they're completely different breeding, there's completely different physical and morphological characteristics based on the breeding of the horses, and so it's not a direct transfer. Of course, he was not too super educated about what he was talking about, but because he was kind of an outsider, he had a different perspective. And so because he started that conversation, they had a barefoot movement with horses. There was the barefoot trimming, and shoes were evil, and blah 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 blah. And just kind of the way that human nature is we kind of, knowledge kind of goes, it kind of pendulums. And so something will become the fad, or interrupt the status quo. The pendulum will swing all the way to an extreme because everything you've always been doing is bad. And then, you'll realize that it wasn't the nirvana that you thought it would be. And then the pendulum kind of swings, then gets back into the kind of that middle zone, middle range, where there's more room for personalization and understanding the concepts at a bigger perspective. And so, when Born to Run came around, I'm like, oh yeah, I've been through this before. And we actually, at the clinic I worked at, I was actually working with elite level runners in Eugene, Oregon. And behind the scenes, we would document BTS, let's see, BTRS, Born to Run syndrome, because now the books. I'm off topic, but it doesn't matter. There's very specific and predictable injuries that happen when people go whole hog on the principles that are kind of being espoused in the kind of that barefoot movement. It was the same thing with horses. It was so cool.
Yeah, that is
really
fascinating.
Yeah. It really is. And now, thankfully, things I think are a little bit more middle zone, pendulum in the middle here. But yeah, crazy.
So, where should we even start? I think I want to do kind of like before, during, and after a race.
Ooh. Yeah.
But I'm always stuck on the before, because I think the before, as a coach, how you prepare, what you practice is so important. And I think that there are aspects that runners do not think about for practicing for race day. There are some times where it's like talking to runners that I don't coach, and they haven't thought about nutrition yet, and they're a month out from race day. And that's a huge problem right there. In terms of prevention, which we mentioned at the very beginning as being like this foundation of success or pain and some problems on race day, like where do you even start when it comes to prevention for foot care?
Well, here's the thing. You need to at least look at your feet on a regular basis. Learn about your feet just through observation. Notice whether or not you have large calluses in specific spots. Notice if your feet have different sore spots or different tendernesses or different fatigue points when you wear different types of shoes. Like, just pay attention to start with. And then, the foundational intervention for preventing issues during a race, during a longer event, is to prevent the weakening effects that prolonged exposure to moisture causes to your skin. And the technical word is maceration. And that is It's essentially, you're washing dishes or you're sitting in the hot tub for a while. When the skin on your fingers starts to wrinkle, that's maceration. And there's some very specific things that happens. But basically, maceration causes the skin to be more fragile and weak. And when I say skin, I mean the epidermis, that top layer. And then it also weakens the connection between the epidermis and the dermis underneath. The dermis is where, like, if you have a blister, that red, really tender, painful skin, that's where the nerves and blood vessels lie. So if you prevent the onset of maceration, then the chance for tissue breakdown on your feet is significantly reduced. And here's the thing, like, so many runners, they don't even consider preventing maceration or doing anything for their feet unless they're going across a river or a stream or something during the race. So I'm always glad if there's a stream crossing or a river crossing, because runners will actually, it's the first time they'll consider doing something. But crossing a river is not the problem. It's the 250,000 sweat glands per foot that is constantly pumping out sweat with every step that you're taking. And so the longer you're out there, you're guaranteed to have maceration setting in. So having a product that you try out or have on hand that is hydrophobic, which is water repelling, that you use. And, people have different preferences. The two brands that are the most well known and that are the highest quality product are the Squirrel's Nut Butter, which is a coconut oil based product, and Salty Britches, which is a lanolin based product. I do not consider them competing products because they are so fundamentally different. Salty Britches is a far superior product for more extreme conditions. But the downsides are that, some people might have a lanolin allergy, or it's really thick to put on. People might not like that. So your Squirrel's Nut is the coconut oil based, it's all natural, vegan, etc. That's a really good something to also be using for daily care prior to the race. And so having something that you use during your training runs, what you'll figure out ideally is how long does this product stay effective? Because during an event, you want to be as efficient as possible with your self-care activities. So changing your socks and shoes just randomly is really a waste of time. So ideally, you're strategic about it, and you know that your hydrophobic layer, your maceration prevention product, let's say it lasts 5 or 6 hours before it kind of starts losing effectiveness. Then that's when you time your shoe and sock change. But then ideally, you also time that shoe and sock change with other self-care activities that take a little bit more time. So you kind of shoehorn all the things that take more time into one sitting. And then have the other times when you're performing self-care activities, you can be super efficient. Because that's really the biggest difference in the elite folks. They're not sitting around putting it's like a NASCAR pit crew when they're coming through. But know your product and know your preferences. Know how your feet are responding. If you have calluses, did you know that calluses are not just 100% a result of running? Calluses are information. They're telling you that you have a concentrated area of friction and shearing forces when your foot is on the ground and going through the stance phase. The stance phase is like when your foot's on the ground, basically. And so that's information to you that your foot is not traveling through in a true manner, and that you're losing some of the energy, the kinetic energy that your foot and ankle and calf have stored up is leaking out. If your foot's kind of toeing in a lot, you've got a callus on the inside ball of your foot, that's an indicator that you could do better with your shoe. And then the calluses put you at risk for blood blisters. underneath, which are painful and are more apt to cause you to slow down or have it affect your race. So a callus during a race, now I kind of changed topic, but a callus is an indication that there's an area of heightened friction or shearing forces while you're running. And so during your training, a callus is a protective tissue. But when you're doing an event that's longer than your training runs, that callus, when it gets macerated, you have to know that just like your fingertips when you're in the hot tub, that's going to swell up and be rough, have a rough profile, and that callus is more apt to then catch on the shoe, and that callus will be moving as you're running, and with each stride you will be trapping, so the callus will move, the bone in your foot stays stable, and the dermis, where the blood vessels and the nerves are located, gets trapped between the bone and that callus. So, and that's called shearing forces, when a tissue is when one tissue is moving on a tissue that doesn't move. That's where those blood blisters come from. So you can prevent your blood blisters by reducing the callus, but if you do reduce the callus before a race as a preventive measure, know that you've removed protective tissue, so then you do need to tape over it to provide the protection that's needed in that area of higher frictions. It's kind of a long answer to a short question, but those are, I think the only other thing to talk about are toenails, but those are some very important preventive strategies that don't really take up a lot of extra time.
Yeah, and I think the biggest point being these symptoms that are popping up, like there's a reason why you are getting blisters or you do have that callus there, and use that information to change something that's going to help you perform better or not experience those blisters that pop up.
Right. And that's kind of my platform, is helping people understand that there is a why behind their foot care issues. And this is a course that I'm needing to build. It's kind of anyhow for now years now. There are particular mobility issues and foot conformation that are more represented in people who have foot care issues. There are people who have consistent toenail issues and consistent toe blister issues or ball of foot. They frequently have limited ankle and foot and toe mobility. So their foot isn't flat so your foot's made to land with your toes flat on the ground, and they stay flat, and your toenails should be facing directly up, and the tips of your toes they're not really made to be in contact with the footbed of your shoe. But if you have limited ankle range of motion and limited tissue mobility in your foot soft tissue, and you're wearing a shoe that has a low heel, that puts those tissues on stretch when your foot lands on the ground. Your ankle does have to go past 90 degrees. It has to go past it's going into 10 degrees of dorsiflexion, which is where your foot's coming up when you're going through your stride. So if you don't have that range of motion, your toes are pulled into flexion, and that's where your toenails then are in contact with the footbed. So understanding the mechanics of why things are getting injured. So I think a lot of times people, they don't know that they have control over some of the variables. Tape can only do so much. And so understanding, why is my foot, why am I consistently getting a blister here or consistently getting calluses? Be curious and try to figure out how to reduce that from happening. And that's really kind of what has become my area of strong expertise. But I think a lot of runners just think that, oh, well, and then there's this weird kind of sick mindset that
I know what you're going to say.
Losing your toenails is a badge of honor. Who brags about hurting themselves. It's not cool. It's not funny. It's not cool. If you live where you wear sandals, it's not kind to anyone around you. Like having nasty feet should not be a point of pride. Like what
Yes.
is wrong with folks?
Yeah.
But yet you consistently are harming yourself. Like who, well,
Yeah.
that's not something to brag about. Your poor feet are doing the best they can.
Yeah.
And to not make, but it's because, there's just not a lot of talk about what variables we have control over and what to do. And there's just a lot of noise from just from people who, there's just a lot of noise out there that it's hard to kind of filter through. And
Yeah.
so that's my platform. Be curious, people.
Yes. And I see a big difference between the road and the trail. You have the marathoners like to brag about losing toenails. And I just recently had an athlete who said she didn't feel like a real runner because she had not lost a toenail during a marathon yet. And I'm like,
yeah, that's sick.
That's like
twisted.
the best, you're in the best situation. Like, we don't want to lose the toenails. And I just think,
Like, who are her friends? She needs an intervention. Who are your friends, lady?
but it is
They're
so
not-
true. Like, that's a
It's
bragging right around marathoners.
No.
And I don't think it should be that way. And I do
Nope.
like that the trail community understands, like, in order to go further, I need to figure out how to prevent blisters, how to stop losing toenails, how to really address these issues. And I do hope that makes its way to the road side of running so that we stop.
There's plenty in the ultra world. But here's the thing that comes from I feel like that just comes from not knowing that something can be done. Like if all your friends are losing toenails, then you kind of become who you hang around. And so
Yeah.
if all your friends like just think that their feet, that there's nothing, they kind of shrug and like, I don't know, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
This is a part of ultra running. You lose your toenails. Then of course that becomes normalized thinking for yourself. And so that's where for myself, like I've realized the last bunch of years, I'm just realizing a lot of things that I've always considered obvious are clearly not. And I
Yeah.
need to do a better job and which is why I appreciate being brought on to podcasts and that, because ultra running, I don't know if you know, but did you know that ultra running is the fastest growing sport internationally?
It's crazy.
And women are the largest demographic who are joining ultra running. Now, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the just the United States. But internationally, it's just, and so we have tons of new people that are coming in and they're trying to navigate and, find their way. So like having good coaches like yourself and informative podcasts that can help people kind of think differently is just critical for their
Yes.
success, because we don't want to lose any of them and we don't need them to be abusing themselves and thinking it's cool.
Right. Yep, absolutely. I want to back up 1 minute. You mentioned when you're practicing with like salty britches or squirrel's nut butter and you're trying to figure out how long it's going to last for you. What should runners be looking for? Should they be paying attention to hot spots, or what should be some signs that, okay, this is the life, 4 hours is the life for me, or 6 hours is the life of this product for me?
Yeah, so just look at your feet when you get done. Really. So if you look at your feet and you get done, you put your hydrophobic product on, your skin barrier, you put that on, you go for whatever, your 5 hour run, and you take your socks off, and they are pale and pruny and look like they're macerated or waterlogged. The proper term would be like swamp foot. Please don't use the term trench foot. That means you've had immersed. That's a cold immersion injury. That is my biggest pet peeve that people are using. It's a completely wrong term. It's like saying somebody with low blood sugar has diabetes. Like trench foot is below 50 degrees Fahrenheit, immersed for days, and that's nerve and blood vessel damage. Maceration is limited to just the epidermis, and it's warm temperatures, and your sweat is really what's causing it. Now I forgot what I was talking about. Yeah, so just take a look at your feet. when you come in from your training run, or let's say if it's a big long training run and you look at your feet, if they look like they're starting to get waterlogged or macerated, then you know that your product has worn off. It's easy. It's that easy.
Okay, awesome. Another question about practicing before race day, taping.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think taping is one thing that athletes are hesitant to do during training because they don't think it's necessary or because they don't think they can replicate what they need to do on race day. So in the backyard, they may think that they're going to run for 2 or 3 days, but they're not going to do that before race day. So how do they figure out what they need to do before they've actually experienced it?
That is a super good question. And this is something that I hear from people on the regular. I have taped many, many thousands of runners over the years. I mean, I'm 20 years into this. And that is one of the things that I've taken for granted. To me, it really isn't that hard to put tape on your feet. I don't think, because I've got far more than 10,000 hours. But I highly recommend everyone who is a runner, who does endurance, if you're going to be out there for more than 5 hours, you're an endurance athlete, you should have some ability to tape a toe or the ball of your foot or the heel. Ball of the foot and the heel are relatively simple because you use a big piece of tape. The biggest thing with the ball of the foot, the biggest mistake people make is they create tension as they that tape should just be laid down, and you should actually fold your foot. You should actually flex your toes up, or like not your toes up, but the ball of your foot you should spread as you put that tape on, because the ball of your foot is really flexible and the tape needs to move with it. And that's kind of a pro tip for you. But practice putting tape on your toes while you're in training, and the ball of your foot and your heel, because at some point in your running career, somebody's going to need taped. And if you've done it at least once or twice, then the chance of it going well is higher. So I just really don't think anyone's doing them sort of by not taping. And honestly, if you pre-tape, you can save yourself a lot of trouble. And that's one of the, oftentimes, and this is kind of one of those things that you learn as you get experience, you learn kind of how your feet respond. Some people, they pre-tape and then they're good for, anywhere from 100 miles to 250 or 300. And they're good. One tape job I've consulted with runners who have gotten through 300-mile races, and they put the tape on one time. It stayed on. Their feet were fantastic at the end. So I would and that person knew that taping is helpful for them, and plus it kind of reduces the amount of messing around with their feet that they needed to do. Some people they'd rather start off with their hydrophobic layer and then tape later. But I think that just playing around with it in training will help you learn kind of what you need. And then, then it's just like everything else in the ultra space. There's a fair amount of trial and error. And yeah, you're going to need to tape somebody one day, like whether you're crew or just, it's not that hard, guys. And I've got videos. My videos are on my website. They're on my Instagram page and my YouTube. Like, the resources are there. I super nerdy talk you through it. So yeah, just have stuff on hand and learn, figure it out.
Yeah, I think
Long answer, short question.
practice is the best way to get better at it and efficient at it, especially in a race. Like, you don't want to be taping your feet for 30 minutes at an aid station because you've never done it before. And in the backyard, you have limited time. So be able to do it efficiently. Yeah.
Or have somebody on your crew. But I think, like, if you're in the ultra community, somebody's going to need foot care help at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we really have you don't have the luxury of just putting your head in the sand and saying, I don't like feet, I want to learn nothing about them, because somebody's going to need your help, whether it's
Yeah.
you or somebody else. That doesn't mean you have to be, just because you learn the basics about foot care. If you don't like feet, like ideally you've got a foot nerd somewhere near you, but you do want to be able to do what needs to be done,
Mhm.
and just have some basic knowledge. But yes, just figure it out. It's not that hard.
So let's say tape is coming off, or a runner decides not to tape right away and they realize, okay, I got some hot spots. I need to tape these toes, or I'm going to tape my heel or ball of the foot or whatever it is. What should they be doing? Should they be washing their feet? What's kind of the steps that they should be taking?
Ooh, super good question. So let's just establish this truth. Never in the history of a blister has one ever gotten better by ignoring it. Okay? Same goes for hot spots. Ignoring it is going to guarantee that it's going to get worse and become more of an issue, which is why I think everyone, maybe not in the backyard ultras where you've got the loopy thing, you've got loopies, but you should have a little basic foot care kit in your pack that has some pre-cut tape, alcohol swab, a needle, and you're good. And then some kind of a resin. So here's the best thing to do for if let's say you've got a hot spot, you wanna address it right away because you listen to us. Hand sanitizer, just the cheaper, no flavors, smells, or any of that. The 72% alcohol hand sanitizer should be in everyone's kit. Like, I mean, all runners should have some type of first aid, but hand sanitizer. So you take your shoe off, you douse your foot in hand sanitizer, rub it around, wipe it off. Like, well, don't really have to wipe it off. It'll evaporate. That will start the drying process for your skin. So now you got your whole foot. Now it's going to be drying out and getting a break from maceration. Now you've created a nice oil-free substrate for that tape to be applied. And then ideally you have a liquid resin product such as Skin Tack or Mastisol. Now I used to always be tincture of benzoin that was recommended, but about 6 years ago I realized that there are products that are better, that don't stain, that last longer. And that's like, so Mastisol is the hospital grade product that was created in wound care to help a dressing adhere to the skin. And so both of them are basically like a liquid resin, which creates a tacky layer on the skin. And the original intention in wound care was that tacky layer protects the sensitive skin from the adhesive of the tape. So these are like people who have like ostomy bags, like, who have adhesive on their skin on a daily basis. They use Mastisol as that base. So then you get your Skin Tack or Mastisol. The real big difference between the two of them, like I just call like Mastisol is like Formula One, super high quality, highest quality you can get. Super sticky, super long lasting. And then Skin Tack is more of a Indy 500. Can you tell I went to undergrad in Indianapolis? Skin Tack has it's a little bit of a better price point, and it has like a wand in it, and you can I always worry about cross contamination, but if it's just for you, you can use it that way. But apply a liquid resin, let it get tacky, and then put your tape on. And if you've done that, they're really, unless it's extremely wet, like it's raining. I have had like at Western States, this will be my 17th year. That tape lasts the rest of the race. I put it on mile 55, or now I've been doing at the beginning, or the day before. That tape will last 50 to 100 miles, or even 300, depending on kind of what's going on. So if you take a moment, put the tape on properly, ideally you don't have to mess around with it and reapply it. So hand sanitizer, a liquid resin like Skin Tack or Mastisol, and then your tape. Those are the three things that you need for proper taping.
And I think going back to, again, for our listeners, practice this because you can get efficient at it, and you have limited time in the backyard in even a timed event if you're trying to run as far as possible. So get better at it. Figure out what you're doing,
Absolutely.
know what you're doing. If you have a
Yeah,
crew, teach them, help them
crew are
understand.
critical. Yeah, crew are critical. And then, normalize having a foot care specialist at an event and that they are compensated in some way for their expertise. So that's part of what I'm working on is kind of creating a paradigm shift, like a skilled volunteer who spent time and effort and expense to be specialized with something should at least have the supplies that they use, paid for by the race. One thing that I've been doing a fair amount here in Florida is I'll pre-tape before an event, the day before, and I get nothing but positive feedback from that because the folks are like, well, I can tape my own feet, but it's just so much easier to just have somebody else do it. But yeah, just have a little bit of practice. I've got resources available for folks. Yeah, it can save you a lot of trouble.
So you've been at Western States for 16 years, going on 17 years. What other races have you been at helping with foot care?
Well, States is the most consistent over the years. Like when I lived out west, it was, just there was tons of ultras out there. Um, that I can't really remember. Yeah, let's see. States is the main one. I've done some multi-day events as well. The Lululemon Further 6-day event like 2 years ago, that was a big one. That was a very big learning opportunity. I was at Leadville this year.
Oh,
That's looking like that's going to be on the regular schedule. And then here in Florida, like Daytona 100, Keys 100, and then there's a couple of others. So yeah.
when it comes to foot care during races, a blister can be debilitating to a lot of runners and it can end their race. I'm assuming you're talking to them while you're also helping them with their foot issues. What mindset side are you seeing in the foot care industry and helping them continue on instead of giving into the foot issues that they have?
That's a good question. So that's so interesting because that's one of the things that I is kind of my raising awareness of is foot care is especially if it's during a race and especially if it's a high stakes race like Western States, like it used to be something you could get into again. Nowadays, it's a once in a lifetime experience. And so I've always felt a very, very heavy burden of responsibility for doing everything I possibly can to ensure that these runners are able to have their best experience. And so I've kind of strong armed my way into having an actual foot care system and program and consistent volunteers who have very high skill level, blah, blah, blah. States. And so we know foot care, we're actually triaging runners. They come in, they sit down, they're going to come to foot care before they go to medical. So we're assessing cognition, hydration, nutrition, mental, like where they're at mentally. And here's the thing, if you are skilled and confident in the way that you're managing their foot care and you're putting tape on them and you're telling them, because I can confidently say this tape's going to stay on to the finish. Yeah, this isn't going to take away all your pain and discomfort, but these tissues are protected. And here's what you need to do. Like you don't need to worry about this anymore. Like, or if something does pop up, like I know that race well enough, here's the aid station that you stop at next. And nobody ever needs to, but if you need a confidence booster. And so some of these races, we actually call it emotional support taping, especially the looped courses. People just want you to, like, they just need that reassurance that everything's okay. And so I'm always educating as well, albeit it looks like this is why this blister has happened. In the future, you might, if you have a shoe that it's a lot of times a heel height is the wrong heel is too low for the runner, or that's ideal for that distance or that runner's anatomy and a mobility. And I'll be like, is there any chance you have a shoe that has a higher heel that you can trade into? Just little tidbits like that, but being positive and being confident and knowing that what I am doing is, for one, is going to last and it is going to reduce the chance for further tissue degradation. So this will not get worse. This is not going to take away the discomfort, but you signed up for that. and you've got this. And what's really great at Michigan Bluff is I have developed such a strong team that we have, like last year was the year that we started more of a pit crew approach to the runners that came in. And last year I had enough of a strong team of foot care nerds, foot care volunteers, that we were able to focus on the amount of time those runners sat in the seats. And it was an average of between 6 and 12 minutes that they sat. And many of these people, because we worked in teams, as many as 3 people per runner with multiple blisters and things that we were addressing. And that just having a competent and confident crew, or somebody that's providing that foot care, saying, I've got you, here's your strategy moving forward. If they seem, and you just pump them up and use positive affirmations, tell them what's going well for them, like switching their mindset to what is going well, what has gone well, and what they have to look forward to. You can kind of like, sometimes I will like give them, like, if you can say, like with these point-to-point races, the next race, you've got so-and-so at such and such aid station, if you're still feeling a little queasy about your feet, and see you at the finish. And so that's a really good question. But having confidence and just really, I think, that mental strategy for people who are often in chaotic or emergency situations, like Navy SEALs, they're trained in this mindset strategy. They say everything goes sideways. They're trained to think to themselves, what is happening? Like, what can I control? What can I identify? Like, I'm standing here. All of my limbs are intact. The door in front of me is closed. Like, just being able to take it back to the things that are identifiable and that you have control over, and that, so that your brain doesn't get just overwhelmed. And so bringing that runner, helping them have a strategy in that moment. Okay, you're good for hydration. You're good for nutrition. What's your plan moving on down the trail? We got you in a dry shirt. Your dry shoes, your feet are taken care of. What else are you worried about right now? And then send them on down the road.
Yeah, I love that. I
Does
love
that
that
answer
approach.
it? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm an empathetic person. I'm honestly not really. I know some people tend to be more of a tough love approach, and that just doesn't work for me. Some of the grizzled old ultra runners, though, they can do the whole, why are you sitting here? You signed up. My back hurts. You signed up for that. That did happen. At Tahoe 100. This is years ago. It's a kind of a clover leaf, can come through that aid station like 5 times during the race. And this guy had been laying in the fucking cot. Sorry, guys.
That's fine.
Been laying on the cot for God knows how long. And he's like, and at some point, like these, like 4 of these old, the original ultra runner, old grizzled dudes with plenty of experience, they just walked up, like one just did like a chin nod to the other 3 guys and they just did a chin nod, and they just all walked over to this dude, stood over him as he's laying there on the cot, and the one guy was like, why are you still here? And they're staring down at him, and he kind of looks up at them and is like, well, my back hurts. And they just stared at him, and then another guy goes, so? And then another one was like, you kind of signed up for that. Get out of here. And they just stared at him. Like, you're not going to get there. I think another guy said, well, you're not going to get to the finish by laying here. And so he just kind of laid there sort of stunned, and he's looking up at them, and they're not relenting. And he's like, whoa. And so he sort of kind of gathered his stuff and then limped off into the darkness. And they probably said 7 words to him total. I'm like, oh my God, you guys are geniuses. Because that's what he needed in that moment. He just needed to be shamed off the cot. But I'm more of an empowerer. I'm an empowerer. I'm not, oh, poor you. I'm like, what? Here's what we can do.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. Here's what we can do. And you're good.
Yep. And I think that logic helps a lot of runners, because they are so emotional in that moment that they need that logic from their crew, from the volunteer, whoever is around them, to get out of their head and just, these
Right,
are the facts. This is everything
right,
that's going well, and this is what you're going to go do now.
right. And this is just, here we are.
Yep.
Come on, bring it. And you can just see it kind of in their eyes, like with they're panicking. They're just super scattered. And that's where it's really cool that with Michigan Bluff, I've got a whole group of, we call it the Michigan Bluff Social Club. It's just a whole crew of 1,000 mile, 2,000 mile buckle holders who are running states back in the 90s and the 80s. Carol Hewitt, it's her yard that we're in, and she's a longtime Western States alumni. And they're hanging out, having a beer, just, for the race. And a few years ago, I started asking them to help when to talk runners out of the chair because the old aid station, the medical captain who previously for the most time I've been there, for the first 10 years, he was a 10-time finisher. So I could count on Kevin to be the closer. I'd be like, Kevin, come on over here, while I go work on somebody else's feet. But those folks are really important, really helpful. Somebody who's experienced, because you could hear it in their voice, and they can kind of tell. They'll be like, they'll walk, I'll just motion to somebody and be like, this runner needs help, like they need to get out of their head, and and one of the OG runners, OG states runners, they'll come over and they'll just look at the runner and they'll be like, well, what's going on? And the way that the runner answers helps them to know what they need to say. Sometimes they need to say, just get off your ass, get down the trail, like stop it. And they somehow intuitively, because they're so experienced and they've been there so many times themselves and with their friends and crew and all that. And then sometimes that runner just needs reassurance as to they are so traumatized by the terrain that they've just navigated because they've gone through the canyons and it's just been really kind of challenging. They're up in the high country, down in the canyons, and they're just traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
And to have somebody explain to them, okay, here's what you have ahead of you. It's rolling hills. You're done with the canyons. You're going to cross the river. And then you can just see the runner just be like, okay, that trauma is over. And they just realize like what ahead of me is doable, like the terrain ahead of me. And these OG states runners, ultra runners, they just intuitively know how to handle that runner in front of them. And it's really a beautiful thing. We need to do a documentary on just those people. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I agree. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with the 6-day event with Lululemon and what you experienced? Because running for 6 days, like, that's a whole different ball game. Backyards are going for 2, 3, 4 days just in order to get to Big's backyard. And I
Yeah.
think just, I don't know, the mindset, like the backyard is, you have to have the physical fitness, but it's really a mental game. And what were some of your experiences with working with those runners?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things about like the multi-day events that are the backyard ultra format, where you're looping through. One of the biggest things I've seen is that you need to have actually there's more like having a strategy, like a route and a routine, and understanding also that the body changes over and anticipating how the body changes over the space of multiple days. And so the needs of like the clothing that you're wearing changes because by about day 3 there's just more swelling that starts to happen. So, for instance, like my runner was wearing the compression shorts, but by day 3, that seam being in that exact same spot was no longer good.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to, what was really cool about that event was that there were tailors on site
Wow.
that you could modify any clothing that, each runner had a kit that was specifically made for them of a variety of different clothing for a variety of different conditions. And so I could call the tailor and say, can you change the inseam of these shorts? So understanding that swelling, the body swells over time, And so day three is kind of where usually it kind of kicks in. The feet can start to be swelling as well, and so there's strategies to ideally you have a plan in place for when that happens. Like, okay, I know that we're going to get a little puffy. We need to, and it's really, really heavy on prevention and get seeing something happening before it actually happens. You don't want the tissue to break down before you put the anti-chafe product on. So you're using more of a strategy that needs to last for days. And so for, let's say, for areas where chafing is happening on non-foot skin, like pack straps, they weren't wearing packs, but for example, if you are doing something where you're multi-days and you have your race pack on, or bra straps, the anti-chafing product, like Two Toms Sport Slick, is like really the best. But for multi-days, you're better off with using cover roll tape. It's a really thin tape that's made to protect the skin from dressings. So if you put a strip there and you got your resin, and that can last for days. So that's one less thing you have to reapply. And so what those runners needed an actual routine. So they had breakfast, they had lunch, they had dinner, all at the same time. That this is the sports psychologist and the sports nutrition recommended. They said, have a routine that's similar to the routine that you had at home. So Camille was accustomed to having tea at 4 o'clock. So every day she came in and we had her tea ready for her. And now, granted, she was sitting as little as possible, and we were prepared ahead of time, but there was a lot more like a routine and preventing. So preventing the body's way of responding to multiple days of moving. Constipation is something that can be happening. Having diarrhea is something that can be happening. So it's not something you just say, I feel constipated, and then just ignore it. Like intervening so that that doesn't get worse. Addressing the, problem solving as to why is this diarrhea happening? Those are, and so being proactive, understanding how the body changes over several days, having a plan in place, having a plan C and B, and then really having strong communication among the crew was critical. So one of the biggest things with crew has to be redundancy. If it's multiple days, there has to be redundancies in the roles because people need to be able to rest. And there's a tendency a lot of time with crew is people want to own their area of interest or expertise. They want to own that, and they want credit for I'm the one who does the thing. And that's really selfish. And people are mean well, but it can get in the way of the care of the runner if you are not in the proper mindset, if you're not taking care of yourself. And so redundancy, so should have 2 people per role, and then schedule for people getting their proper rest and clear communication. So let's say I tapped out for a little while to take a couple hours of sleep. The person who's doing the tasks that I'm typically doing, the minute I come back, they share with me everything that happened. I talked to the tailor. We got 3 no pairs of socks. Like, tell me everything that happened and if anything happens with me, I'm going to tell them. And so having that communication so we don't have any lapses. But I think understanding how the body responds, and swelling is probably the biggest. Swelling, protection from sun, so your lips get dehydrated and sunburned during the day. So sunscreen on preventing things that makes you miserable. So preventing sunburned lips. So during the day you've got sunscreen. At night, putting something that's emollient and healing, like the squirrel's nut or salty britches at night, so your lip skin can be healing. Having moisturizing eye drops because the eyes get dehydrated, and using those before you're symptomatic. So eyeballs, and the bloody noses. Bloody noses happen because the skin in the nasal passages dry out. So the best way to prevent it before you start bleeding, you want to put like Vaseline or something, like Vaseline or salty britches up your nose and pack that in. Not pack it in, meaning there's a ton of it, but you can just use a Q-tip or your fingernail and put that up your nose because you know you're out there all day and you're going to dry out. And so those things, having a plan for those things rather than reacting, oh crap, my runner's got a bloody nose. Well, we could have predicted this. Anyone who's been in the desert for any length of time knows that bloody noses happen. And so it's kind of a long answer, but the multi-day events, a schedule is really the thing that helps people to be as efficient as possible and spend as little time as in the chair as possible. So the mindset with Camille was, we keep her in the chair. She'd sit and have her tea, but we had a timer, and we had agreed ahead of time how long the plan was for her to sit in the chair. And if she needed to sit in the chair for longer than the allotted 2 minutes, we would communicate that with her. Look, you're at a minute and a half. Is there a reason why you need to stay in this chair longer? And if there wasn't an actual solid reason, it was like, well, timer's up. You got to get going. And then what we were able to do was to maximize by being efficient with the other times she was taking a break or for eating in particular. Then she had more time to actually sleep. So there was dedicated time in the middle of the night that was for sleeping, and it was like 90 minutes was allotted, between 90 and 120 minutes. And so having that schedule really made a big difference. But that's, communication with the crew and the runner, and yeah. Long answer, short question.
Well, and
hopefully that's helpful.
No, I absolutely love that answer. One of the best things that I learned when I got into ultra running from a registered dietitian who is specifically helping ultra runners was, you need to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner every single day. You need to keep that structure.
Yes.
Running there's a lot to it, but at the same time, it's so simple. As humans, we thrive on routine. Why don't you do the same thing in your running? You need water and
routine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And then communicating. So here's the thing with ultra runners. We're our best and worst enemies is ultra runners we're conditioned to not complain. We're conditioned to ignore the symptoms that our body is presenting to us. And that helps to be able to, if you don't mind, it doesn't matter. But if the runner has a responsibility to communicate and not feel that they're going to be judged, or that, it's considered complaining. Yeah, so a runner needs to say, it burns when I pee. or I'm having to urinate like a lot more frequently than I was a couple hours ago. Well, that's a symptom of something needing to be adjusted. And that's an indication to the crew, because after a couple days, the runner doesn't have that mental capacity to necessarily go through that, the logarithmic thought process. They just need to do what they're told. But their responsibility is to clearly communicate what is happening in their body in that real time, not wait. Like, we need to know immediately if something's a little different, if something feels a little bit off. And so if there's frequent urination, that is more of an indicator that you're consuming more electrolytes than you need, because your body's trying to offload. And so, the communication and knowing your body and responding accordingly. And that kind of stays in the whole mindset of prevention.
Yes.
Reacting is the last thing you want to have to do. You want to have been able to predicted whatever it is that's happening.
Yeah, definitely. Toe socks. Do you like them? Ooh. Are they not necessary? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, toe socks, that's a good question. So toe socks, again, we kind of have a joke in the PT world, like our answers are always, it depends. Because it depends on a bunch of different things. So generally, I will recommend, if somebody typically has multiple toes that they need to pre-tape, or that constantly start to argue during a race. Ideally, from an efficiency perspective, if you can use toe socks and then you don't need to pre-tape or tape during the race, then give them a try. Some people hate them, some people love them, some people like because it feels like their toes are more separate. And the great thing about the toe socks nowadays is there's different brands that have different fit. They fit differently. There's different thicknesses and there are different yarns that are used to make them. So it used to be, used to meaning like 20 years ago. There's this one brand and, you try them and if they didn't fit your toes properly, then that was kind of it. But now, like, it's a good option to reduce the monkeying around with your feet that you need to do if you have multiple toes that typically start to argue and have tissue breakdown.
Awesome. It's just been something that has really popped up in the last couple of years. And I feel like people either love them or hate them, but they really want to like them because they think that they may be beneficial.
No, let's not do that. Let's not get sucked into the marketing. Yeah, because there's more brands that use, there's no be all and other than maceration prevention, there is no one fix for anything. But it's America and marketing is a big thing and it's easy to just do what other people do because they do what you need to, and that's a part of just, anytime you partake in any sort of hobby, over time you learn what works for you. You learn to be more specific or specified. And so it's easy when you're kind of newer to take the advice or kind of follow along with the people that are around you. But yeah, there's, I don't know, try them if you like them. Great. If you don't, there's no judgment. Mm-hmm. Some people love them. Some people hate them. That's on you. People have different shaped feet, toes are different shapes, and so, yeah. If you like them, that doesn't mean I need to wear them.
Right. Yep.
Not everybody likes chocolate cake.
What?
Just because I like chocolate cake doesn't mean you have to eat chocolate cake. That's my mindset. But yeah, they're definitely worth trying, for sure.
Can you touch on prevention in the sense of looking at the foot, understanding what is going on, and realizing that, okay, this is an ankle mobility issue, or you need to strengthen your feet, or you have weak calves?
There's so many courses that I need to build because there's conversations that I'm consistently having. So yeah, I random fact. So I finished my doctorate in education in April last year, which was really taking up a lot of my time. And then so there's a queue of things that I need to do to provide resources for. But the bottom line is that all runners should be doing heel raises, so where you come up on your toes, sometimes people call them calf raises, should be doing heel raises on a slant board or off a 2x4 when they're brushing their teeth twice a day. Everyone. Because if you're doing it into a negative space, meaning your heel is lower than the ball of your foot and your heel has to touch the ground at the bottom, doing it off of a stair does the exact opposite because your tendon panics and gets tight. So if you're doing heel raises, let's go with both feet. Your feet are right next to each other. You come all the way up on your tippy toes, go all the way back down, and at the bottom you kind of feel like a comfortable stretch. You're addressing multiple things. You're addressing the mobility in your ankle, the mobility in your big toe joint, the mobility and extensibility of your calf and Achilles, and the soft tissue in your foot. And then you're also ideally training some people, if you have weak calves that are weak or just not neurologically connected very well to your head, your brain, and that's a whole kind of a longer conversation. The toes tend to curl and claw the ground, curl up if there's not a lot of calf strength. And so those toes clenching when you're toeing off, when your foot hits the ground, and then if your toes are clenched, your toenails are perpendicular to the supporting surface, the footbed, and they get smashed. And that's a really big cause for foot care issues, because that's not how the toes are built. It's not how the foot is built. The toes should be flat on the ground when you toe off. And the ball of the foot should be, the big toe should be able to flex back to a good 90 degrees. And so heel raises into some negative space just twice a day, as many as you can. I have on my website, drtonyafootcare.com, I have my heel raise protocol. That's a free resource for folks. But that can change. And also as a physical therapist, my job is to think 20 and 30 years down the line. So maintaining foot ankle mobility and tissue extensibility over the years has nothing but positive benefits for you. So that would be the first answer to that question.
I love it.
And then there's things that you can see about the foot, like, if you constantly have, and you can see like my recent, well, mom died in December, so I've been not super posting that much on Instagram, but I do have or my YouTube channel too, I have posts about what the calluses in different parts of your foot mean. So if you have a callus on the ball of your foot on the inside, that means you're collapsing towards the inside. So that can be an indication that your foot needs more support for the longer runs. I think that variability in shoes is something as a strength building strategy that a lot of folks are not aware of. Variety is what builds strength. And so think about the difference between a track set of spikes. What are they? They're basically a sock with like spikes on it. There's super flexibility. There's no padding, no cushioning. You don't need it because you're moving fast. And when you're running more quickly, you're more up on the ball of your foot. So you don't need a bunch of other stuff. And then having having a shoe that with more flexibility, more flexibility and movement for your shorter, more intense workouts. And then having a shoe that has a little bit more stability, kind of just based on how the wear pattern of your foot is for your middle distance, kind of meat and potatoes stuff. And then having a shoe that has more stability, maybe a little higher heel for your longer distance is really kind of more of an ideal strategy, because then you're working your foot ankle complex differently for the different terrain and your different amount of time that you're on your feet. That variety of footwear, it builds resilience. So that was kind of off topic, but really kind of answering, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, 100%. I think like we rely on our feet for running. So everyone, just please take care of your feet so that, I don't know. I think it's also a longevity thing. It's not, again, as you said, about today or about a race in 6 months or a year. Like, what are you going to be like when you're 70 years old? Are you going to have that mobility, the strength? So important.
Right. Yeah. And I think we just, we kind of our recurring theme here is, pay attention.
Yes.
Be curious. Be curious about, like, why does my foot, like, why do you think I'm losing that toenail? Or, what kind of mobility do I have in my ankle? And so the best way to test your ankle mobility is you can look up the knee to wall test, which is basically you stand in a staggered stance with 1 foot in front of you, 1 foot behind, and you start off with your toes just a few inches from the wall, and then you bring your knee forward while you're keeping your heel on the ground. And then you scoot your foot back until you can reach the limit of your knee touches the wall, but you can barely keep your heel down. And then that's a test of it's functional ankle mobility. Within normal limits, or kind of the normal range, is to have 4 inches between your toe, your big toe or the longest toe, and the wall. That would be considered more normal range of motion. If you have less than that, or if you have more than a centimeter difference between one ankle to the other, then you would want to do just do the heel raises in the negative space, and you'll be able to improve that symmetry and the range of the ankle. Because I think one of the biggest things that I see all day long is because of the pendulum has swung and the trend is so firmly in favor of low drop shoes.
Hmm.
We have people that have impaired ankle mobility and they're in a low drop shoe, and that's just not what they need. A shoe, if you don't have a lot, if you have a limited ankle mobility or less ankle mobility, a low drop shoe is just, especially for longer distances, is really setting you up to have potentially have issues, because what that does is when you put your foot on the ground, if you're in a lower drop shoe but you have a high drop ankle, when you put your foot on the ground, all of those calf and ankle and foot tissues are at end range, that they're at the furthest length in that the length that they have, and that's where tissue is the most fragile and prone to injury. So tissue and muscles, they generate the most force and are in their healthiest place when they're challenged at mid-range. So just understanding like what you have for ankle mobility and your big toe mobility. If you are not able to bring your big toe up to 90 degrees, almost perpendicular to the ground, then there's some choices that are better to be made with the shoe that you're choosing. So a shoe that has more of a rocker sole or a stiffer sole that decreases the amount of time your foot's on the ground, so increases that transition from initial contact to toeing off, will help take some stress off that poor big toe. But a lot of times the big toe has limited mobility because nobody ever does anything with it. But if it's rigid, that's a different story. Those are that's kind of my platform, is to kind of educate people to make shoe choices based on based on measurable characteristics and actual understanding of biomechanics.
Yeah.
Than choosing a shoe because your friend is wearing it or some famous runner is wearing it or it's the trendy shoe. That's not the best reason. I mean, and when you're new, I get it. You kind of make decisions based on, the people that you're hanging around, but elevating the critical thinking in shoe choosing is definitely my platform. That's a good question. Anyhow.
No, I think just, again, looking for the reasoning behind things gets you so far when you just have that critical thinking aspect to running, but then also just to life in general. But it can help you figure out a lot of things. And I have my athletes do the ankle mobility test, and it's very eye-opening for some of them.
The needle wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Or like when they mention things in their training, it's like, okay, let's look at these different things because there's a reason why this is happening. And
Right.
I think we just need to get better at pausing and thinking through the situation. And like, okay, there's a reason this is happening. We need to figure out why.
Yeah. Yeah. Be curious.
Yep.
Be curious.
Yep.
Not everyone. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. And I think that's a part of why people are attracted to the ultra distances. They're not people who really need things that are super structured and predictable. There's something kind of twisted about us. We kind of like the unknown.
Yep. Yep.
We're like, well, that went sideways. What I learned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I hear that from a lot of runners is they like, especially now that beyond the 100-mile distance is becoming more popular, they like the unknown aspect. They like the problem solving part of it, but let's also problem solve or actually prevent the problems with our feet. And that hasn't always been considered. And I hope that it becomes part of the norm where we are talking about foot care and prevention and having structured sock changes and applying salty britches based on what you need for your race.
Right. Yep. I've got a whole plan I've revolutionized the ultra running culture. Is to, first of all, you need to think about your feet, but also improving the bringing the general knowledge about foot care into modern times. There's a lot of old advice that's far expired. We walk around, just because it's something that was done back in the 90s, it doesn't mean that that's current. We have much better products available, different clinical reasoning kind of that's available. We just to say that, oh, what this has always worked fine for me. I don't know that that's really that's really good. That's a really good, that's an actual reason for why you're choosing a particular product or a particular strategy. If you're the only one being affected, that's fine. But if you're sharing that information with somebody who's new,
Yep.
I don't know that's doing them much of a service. I mean, we used to, like, we had phones that had cords, and that was normal, and that worked fine. But now we have, cell
Yep.
phones because we learned better, and so now we do better. And
Hmm.
so that's again one of my platforms is like we need to collectively, I'm going to collectively drag people with me into modern thinking with regard to their approach to foot care so that we can help more people be successful in what it is that they're doing.
I love it. I love it. Is there anything that we have just completely missed that you want to mention?
I don't know. I mean, there's always so much more there's always so
There is.
much to talk about. But I think, like, because we've, I think we've kind of consistently reiterated or introduced the concept of prevention and being curious
Yeah.
we in multiple ways. Like, hopefully that's the takeaway is
Yeah.
like, wonder why, what can I do about this, you
Yes.
know be an empowered runner
And I
and
think,
include your feet.
yes. And I think to your point, like, it goes for everything in life, but for running, for ultra running, you can be handed the same lesson over and over and over again. And you can read your book, but if you don't
Yeah,
actually stop and think and actually apply what you've learned, it's not going to help you. So
right.
do something with the information instead of just storing it in your brain and not doing anything about it.
Right. And then, yeah, so you just reminded me of something. So frequently with foot care issues, it's a multivariant problem. So the issue is caused by multiple variables. And often what people will do is they'll address one variable and then they will just throw everything out and they'll be like, well, that didn't work. I guess I'll always have black toenails. When there was three variables that needed to be manipulated or identified and modified to bring them to solving the problem at hand. And so I think that's probably the biggest, because you get all this marketing out there and they're like, oh, wear the one type of sock. Well, you know what? If socks were the only variable that determined whether or not people got blistered,
Mm-hmm.
there would be no blisters because
Yep.
for the most part, nobody's wearing cotton socks anymore. Like, people are wearing good quality socks. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just the socks you choose. It's multiple variables. And so I think that's one of the things that kind of people miss if they don't have information from like a podcast like this or how do you know
Yep.
how to identify what you need to do to help yourself. And so that's why I appreciate folks like you inviting me to be on podcasts so we can share good information, current information, modern information, and current best practices so we can help more people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can you share how you've mentioned your website a couple times? Can you share how people can learn more about you, follow you on Instagram, and I know you do have a couple offerings on your website.
Well, yes, thank you so much for asking. So on Instagram, my handle is Tonya K. Olson, DPT, and it's TONYA OLSON, DPT. And then I have a YouTube channel that's Tonya K. Olson. The content is the same as far as foot care. I think that YouTube might be a little bit easier to kind of scroll through. But the latest thing that I've been working on that is still a work in progress, but there are some pretty good resources on there, is Dr. Tonya Foot Care. So drtanyafootcare.com. And I have a couple of courses that are paid courses. And then I have a fair amount of free resources on there. And that's only going to be growing. And one day soon, I will have a foot care specialist certification course
Awesome.
that I've been threatening to finish for forever. And then that's going to open up a whole different level of community. And the vision is to elevate the foot care that's provided at races, because we've got more foot care specialists who have common, consistent, current best practice knowledge. So, but yeah, let's come find me. And don't ever hesitate to reach out. Like if for like a direct message, especially on Instagram. Sometimes I respond right away, sometimes I don't, but I generally don't mind if people reach out. And if it's a foot issue, the first thing I'm going to ask is for you to send me pictures. Because I can't help you if I don't know it. Because I've just done this long enough. I can take a look at a foot and be like, oh yeah, I can tell you what's happening. And then to the best of my ability, I will try to help or send you to a resource that I have that's more informative. But
Awesome.
this has been great.
Awesome.
I really appreciate this.
I will include
Yay.
all those those links in the show notes. Thank you so much again, Tonya. I just hope that everyone can take away a handful of things, but just to really reduce it to the bare minimum, like there's no excuse for not putting together a foot care plan now. Like
100%. Everyone needs to have you should have a kit. Oh, I forgot. I'm a columnist with the Ultra Running magazine.
Oh, awesome.
My first article was the December issue. So
Okay.
I have the basics of foot care on that. So stay tuned there.
Yes.
Apparently. Sorry.
Yes.
I forgot I did that.
No, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, everyone should have a foot care kit with the basic supplies, tape, resin, and hand sanitizer. And some scissors.
Yeah, so have the basics, have those foundations, use this information to put together your own routine, practice it, like just be proactive in this and be preventative so that when you show up on race day, you can be in the best position possible. You can know how to address issues as they come up and really like help others too. I think that was one of my biggest takeaways from you is again, the ultra community is amazing. I think the community is one of my favorite parts of ultra running and just being able to talk with others, but to be able to help them too. Not everyone is going to have the knowledge right away, but if you can share Tonya's resources, if you can share the podcasts, other podcasts that she's been on to just spread the word and to help other runners understand foot care, it's going to be amazing to see where it's at in 5 years.
100%. Don't make me cry at a race, because that happens sometimes. I'm like, it didn't have to happen. You're breaking my heart.
It's windy, right? You got something in your eye?
It's usually later. It's usually later in the day, especially at States. It's usually later in the day. I'm starting to get a little tired, and then I get a little weepy. It didn't have to happen. I've let you down. Why? Why do I not do a better job? Yeah, it was fantastic.
Well,
all right, stay warm up there.
Yes,
North Dakota.
It's pretty warm right now, but the cold is coming back in a couple days. It's the wind that makes the biggest difference, right?
Yeah. Oh, dear Lord, because there are no trees. There's a pretty girl behind every tree, and yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Tonya. Remember, check out her book. Check out the links in the show notes. And until next time, strive to go just one more hour or one more step.
Heck yeah. Be curious.
Thanks for tuning in to One More Hour. If you enjoyed this episode, hit follow so you don't miss the next yard. And share it with a runner who loves pushing their limits. I'd love to hear your own stories of going one more. Connect with me on Instagram at the One More Hour Podcast. And if you could leave a quick review, it'll help more runners find the show and keep going when they want to stop. Until next time, just go one more hour.